Gloria from Hupela.com. In this video, I'm going to explain a chronic metabolic condition that many women suffer from, namely polycystic ovary syndrome, and the symptoms that characterizes it. But before we begin, let me explain what Hupela is. Hupela specializes on improving women's health based on the latest science and natural and affordable solution that can help women across the lifespan. The company was set up by Dr. Crystal Goodberg and Dr. Daryl Fernandez, who both have broad experiences in clinical research and life sciences. You can find more information on the website hupela.com. PCOS is the most common hormonal condition among women at childbearing age. Women who suffer from this condition can have irregular period, acne, excess hair, cysts in the ovaries. They may also struggle to get pregnant and struggle with their weight. Very often this condition found out when one cannot get pregnant and they visit their gynecologist. Women are very often confused with these terminologies, and no wonder why, because they're very similar, but actually they're quite different. PCO means polycystic ovary, meaning when a doctor performs an ultrasound, they may say that there are many follicles found in your ovaries. This doesn't mean any long health consequences and can be normal at some period of your life. These cysts can clear. PCOS, on the other hand, doesn't necessarily mean that you have cysts in the ovaries, although in most of the cases this is present. The key emphasis here is on the word syndrome, meaning that you have a long-term condition that causes a hormonal imbalance. So some of your hormones might be lower or higher, and these are causing those typical symptoms that I explained before. There can be two reasons for this. For example, it is possible that your friend actually confused the terminologies what we just discussed now. So it's possible that when you say to them that you have PCOS, they will be saying, "Oh, I have PCOS too." So it's good to ask back, what do you mean about having PCOS? And then your friend is going to explain that maybe the doctor just found the cyst in the ovaries. So that could mean that your friend maybe is having just a PCO. It can also mean that the doctor didn't take the symptoms into consideration. So one of the reasons is that women confuse these terminologies. The other reason can be that maybe both you and your friend have PCOS, but you have different symptoms. There are many different types within PCOS, so that means that for women meeting, they would be saying different combinations of symptoms. In another video, we're going to explain these more in depth. PCOS should be diagnosed by a medically trained gynecologist. Very often, this consultation is going by having a look at your ovaries. Ideally, this should be both transvaginal and abdominal, because sometimes the abdominal ultrasound may not actually show the cyst accurately. And then once the doctor had a look at your ovaries, they should also take your symptoms into considerations. Some of these symptoms can be struggling to get pregnant, can be that you struggle with your weight, could be that you have the irregular period or different bleeding patterns, could be that you are already pre-diabetic. There are many different symptoms. The very important part here is that the doctor is taking all these things into consideration. So it's not only the ultrasound and it's not only the symptoms. All should be looked into it. The doctor might also have a look at your hormone levels, but some of these hormones have to be checked at a particular time of your period. So if you have an irregular period, this can be quite difficult. Also, some of these hormonal imbalances have very visible symptoms. For example, as we explained, high testosterone levels can be causing acne or hairy face. You might also experience some dark patches. These dark patches could be showing at the neck area, or for example, the armpit, or even at the groin area. If based on these symptoms you suspect that you have PCOS, definitely look for a medically trained gynecologist who can diagnose you. Ideally, you could be looking for someone who specializes in PCOS. Very often, the diagnosis is not too straightforward for women, and we hear many women saying that they've been to different doctors and they're saying all sorts of different things. For example, for myself, it took me years to get diagnosed. I suspected that I have issues from the age of 17 because I had irregular period, but then the doctor just diagnosed me contraceptive, and they were saying that the contraception pills are going to help me to regulate. So even after a few years, when I stop the pill, I will have regular period. But this didn't happen. So I went to see another doctor in another country, and the same thing happened. I got the contraception pill, and after the contraception pill, I still didn't regulate. I had many other symptoms, but actually the doctors either had no time or they didn't take into consideration. It was probably the third or fourth time when finally the doctor sent me for ultrasound, and they also had a look at my hormones. Although my hormones were in range at this time, I got the diagnosis of PCOS because I had irregular period and I had the cyst in my ovaries. Only later, around 3-4 years later, I double checked my hormones, and actually my testosterone was elevated. So I'm not really sure if my testosterone were actually in range at the first time and they just had a look at the wrong time, or it's possible that my testosterone only elevated much later. So very often diagnosis is not that straightforward and you need to go to the doctors. But the aim of this video is that you can be more aware of what's happening with PCOS and you can ask the appropriate questions from your doctors. So if the doctors say or write on your paper that you have polycystic ovaries, you can ask your doctor, so what about my other symptoms? Does this indicate PCOS? And you can investigate further. I think the diagnosis can be quite important because then you know that you have to deal with this in the longer term, and you can have a look at some lifestyle management strategies that, for example, we're going to explain later in our videos. We think you should be aware of the Rotterdam criteria because very often the doctor don't explain this. The Rotterdam criteria defines that you have PCOS if you have one of the following symptoms: either irregular period or problems with your menstrual bleeding. This, for example, can mean that you have period more often than every 21 days or less often than every 35 days. It can also mean that you only have period once or twice a year, or you have prolonged bleeding. So the doctor can look into this for you. The second criteria based on the Rotterdam criteria is to have cyst in the ovaries. This doesn't just mean that you have cyst in the ovaries, it defines the certain number of cysts. So it's 10 follicles per ovaries. It is also possible that you only have this on one of your ovary, but in many cases it's present in both of the ovaries. The third criteria is that your hormones are out of range. So these can particularly be androgens, so like testosterone, but may also mean that your FSH or your LH hormone are out of range. but it may also mean that some of your other hormones are out of range. If you have any of these two, that defines that you have PCOS. If the doctor only had a look at your ovaries and didn't take a look into these symptoms, you can definitely say to look into this. If you like this video, make sure that you look out for our future videos. Next time we're going to be explaining the different PCOS types, the potential factors that may contribute to PCOS, and some management strategies. You can subscribe to this channel, and you can also sign up to our newsletter on hupela.com, where we send out weekly healthy recipes. Bye now!